signing, because this is before emails were really established, etc. So
man, how old are you?
Well,
I'd get my courier pigeon and I'd send it over to the other man, and he'd.
Well, last time I remember him cutting his teeth was year 7 of the ice skating rink, so he started young.
Nice one, nice one.
Going once, going twice, sold. You're listening to the Property Pod.
All right, guys, welcome back to the Property Pod, your weekly engagement into real estate here in the Hobart Marketplace. I'm your host, Aaron Horn, and it gives me great pleasure to be back at the desk as always. I'm getting so good at this intro, I could do it in my sleep. I've got Patrick Berry and John McGregor.
It's almost like you do it weekly.
It is almost like I do it weekly. I tell you what, I'm here and we're here to stay. We're kicking butt. Doing it weekly is paying off, and I'm going to tell you why. 3 different people have hit me up in the last 2 weeks with praise for our show.
Really?
I got pulled over by, do you remember Jess Rice from school?
Yep. I really wanted to say random man on the side of the street.
Well, a random man might come up to me and say something like this, but yes, I got pulled over by, so Jess Rice's brother, Alex, is really good friends with Sarah, his wife, Fran, so drawing a long bow, but Fran is actually a listener who said, I listen every week, I love it. Yeah. And I was like, no, it's not very good. And she said, no, it's really good. I really like the investor episode. So they've actually invested in Launceston and buying blocks in Swanwick. So they actually started a small business. So I'm going to give him a shout out now. Wellington Motor Works. So Alex is a really good mechanic, does lots of European cars, BMWs and such. And
the only problem I have with this is I'm pretty sure Fran already knows about that business, and as our only listener, advantage.
No, because then I was going to move on to the next shout out, which was for Megan, who is our listener. Who actually she can't do it because she's on a super yacht in the Riviera. So Megan, if you're listening and your car needs a service, go to Wellington Motor Works. Ricey will look after you. But happy birthday for your 30th. So there was a third one that
I'm excited. What's the third?
I can't remember right now. But I did promise someone else I'd shout out to them. I was just like, man, all these people. Oh, I know. It's the one you've got. You've got a shout out that you want to give out to a friend of the pod.
Oh, Jared.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah. Upgrading Jared to friend of the pod status this week.
Yes. Jared Bevan, welcome to the friend of the pod status. You've
in that realm.
Yeah, you're in the upper echelon, and we'd love to have you back on to discuss all things.
I was actually hoping to see him at Foot Locker's reopening on the weekend, where they had 30% off all Nikes. If you didn't get around that, Jared, it's too late, mate.
Who goes out into real bricks and mortar stores these days? Pat, it's online or bust.
All right.
Jared may.
Can't argue with that. Jared, they've also got white Air Force Ones in stock.
All right. So, once all the shout-outs are done, I thought we'd jump into some real estate stuff. Just wanted to cover off how things are going in the marketplace. For you, John, how's things out there in the wild selling properties?
I'm really enjoying the conversations of these at the moment, because this reminds me of the market that I cut my teeth in when I first started, where I'd watched in our office all the salespeople have this market where they're dealing with multiple offers and, prices are well above the asking price. Like, oh my God, what do we do? I remember one of them talking about signing, because this is before emails were really established, etc. So
man, how old are you?
Well,
I'd get my courier pigeon and I'd send it over to the other man, and he'd.
Well, last time I remember him cutting his teeth was year 7 of the ice skating rink, so he started young.
Nice one. Nice.
Admittedly, the generations of our salespeople at the time didn't like the computers, but
they only had one. And
can I book in 15 minutes on the interwebs?
It was a very unnecessary thing to say on the line. So, but there was this moment that it was Dad's story about. He was in the board one day, and all of them there was just a bit of silence, and then one of them said, "Oh, who turned the tap off?" And what they're referring to was actually the change, obviously, in the amount of people that were coming through to open homes, the way in which they were negotiating.
Yep.
And there was a line that I heard. I think one little summary that probably a lot of buyers' minds are is that they're going to wait and see, what are we talking about, Pat? It was what else have you got?
Okay.
What else have you got?
So not just kind of finding the one and jumping on it. It's kind of let's test the market and see what else is out there. I guess we spoke about this in the open home episode the other week about kind of doing your research on all the properties and not feeling like you're rushed into making that decision straight away.
But this actually, I think the real estate agents and our role, we have a much greater influence, I suppose, on markets like this than we do in a really hot market. Because in the hot markets, I think it's easy for us to have I call it the overinflated view of self-importance, where the property goes up, everyone flocks to it, and it's just because they have to speak with you that they have to make the offer. But now in these markets, this is where we start to introduce people to properties that they otherwise not would have looked at.
Yep.
And they do like to look at, you'll just put 3 in a row and bring them through and spend the time with one client rather than just opening up the doors and waiting everyone to flock to you. So the properties will still move, but there's often quite a lot more work involved for us, for working for our clients, to introduce the properties that the otherwise people won't see.
And you're finding that as well, Pat, currently?
Yeah, no, I think John is right. There's definitely not as many buyers attending open homes and not as many people jumping to make offers. So you do need to get a bit more creative in getting deals together.
No, I guess this is a good testing ground for like as you say, you cut your teeth in a pre-email era. But like you guys have been at it for a while.
That was such a false statement.
Have you heard of these electronic mails? But no, you cut your teeth and you've had ups and downs in the marketplace, but where a lot of these young upstarts are kind of coming through and haven't experienced a trickier market. Yeah. So you're actually showing your skill set is this is how we used to do it, and this is kind of skills that are useful now.
Well, John's now one of those people that get to say back in my day.
Back in my day. It's surreal, isn't it? It's quite sad, actually.
Well, what I wanted to jump into today for the rest of the show was kind of talking about how homes used to be affordable, which I'm going to put in what are they called, inverted commas, and I'm going to say, are there still affordable homes in Tasmania is a massive question that we wanted to cover off. And then I wanted to kind of go to the other end of the spectrum, so talk about both ends of the market today, jump into are there any affordable houses out there, and then wanted to jump into are there any that are hitting over the $1 million mark?
I think more than most. For the million at the moment. It used to, that was several years ago when it made headlines when Hobart got its first $1 million sale. But it just passes by without anyone, blinking an eye at the moment.
Yeah,
so hold that comment because he wants to get to the $1 million.
Look, we can jump straight into the.
Oh shit!
We'll jump with the cheapies first, John.
While people are still listening.
So we'll go to the point where what houses and what areas are people going? Actually, this is still good value. What is affordable?
I guess a Domain report came out saying that despite house prices shooting up by over 50% in key areas of Tassie, the latest Domain house pricing report showed a handful of regions outside of Hobart still boasting a median of less than 400,000. So I guess when I bought, this was kind of where prices were at, and less than 400,000 was kind of oh man, that's the top of my buying bracket. Yeah. I'm never going to be able to afford over that. If I was looking to buy now, I feel like it would be really tricky. But what I'd have to do is travel to some of the places. So this is actually extending the episode out of Hobart, and we're looking at Tassie.
Potentially taking into account things like we used to speak about, where you rent vesting, where you invest where you can afford to buy and then rent where you want to live.
Yeah.
So it's an interesting look, because obviously the suburbs that are still technically under 400,000, they may seem a little bit remote. Like on the list we have Georgetown, which is at 370,000. We've got Burnie at 390,000, and West Coast properties are still around the high 100s, early 200s. They seem like places you'd never consider potentially buying, but there's people that live in those areas, and
absolutely,
and they could make good rental investments to get you in the market
over long term. And remember when we had Chris on, all their investments were in Devonport and Burnie,
and Ulverston.
Yeah. So from our perspective, the regional centres of Tasmania.
Oh, look, people still need shelter, places to live. People need, whether it's in the capital city or out of the capital city. So you're still going to be able to get your rent collected and pay off the mortgage that way if you're an investor on that front. Or if you're looking to get into the market, maybe it is moving to a regional area, which a lot of people move from do the tree change to here to make that change as well. So
the West Coast is an interesting one. obviously everyone knows I like bikes, and they've recently just put a giant mountain bike park up in the West Coast.
Is that near Queenstown?
Yeah, that's correct.
Yep.
So, there'll be people out there that see an opportunity like that for another Derby type town to exist.
Yeah, well, the
Maybe
boom of Derby.
Airbnbs pop up. Like Derby went from $30,000 a property, and I think they had their first $1 million sale.
Unbelievable.
Which is a great segue into the other.
Oh, yeah. Are you finished with the affordable homes, Pat?
Well, there wasn't that many, unfortunately, anymore.
No, what's interesting as well, just looking into Bridgewater as well. So it's still saying that Bridgewater is quite affordable, with the median now being $380 there, which again, it feels like that was quite high for that area, of
course.
in the past. But yeah, as you say, 50% growth in
Back in my day, I used to sell Bridgewater for $140,000.
Back in the pen and paper day.
Yeah, back in the pen and paper day.
They were the good old days.
You had to actually drive to the vendor's house to get a signature off them. Like, you couldn't just send it to them. It's long gone.
It's interesting though, like Hobart as a hub is growing, obviously population growth, all these things that we've spoken about previously. We've constantly said kind of you've got to look outside of the major centres to kind of be able to afford, especially if you're in this first home buyer market. So anybody out there that is in that spot, maybe that's a consideration that needs to happen. Or as we've mentioned, rent vesting is another way of getting yourself in the market, Blake Smedley style.
Yeah, I think it's just another friend of the pod. Oh, we've got 3 now. I think these days you've just got to get a little bit creative. Like, maybe your first property's not your forever home.
Yeah.
Like, maybe you've got to, buy somewhere where you wouldn't consider, taking a property just to be able to get into that marketplace and then level up from there. Like, it's nice to have all the bells and whistles on the very first property, but maybe that's not possible at the moment in the marketplace.
Absolutely, and that rule's applied for the longest time, and especially if it's your early days, you've still got decades to move into an ideal scenario down the road.
Yeah.
But the interesting thing is though is that if you don't spend everything you've got in that first home, you're actually going to get to where you want to be quicker, because your repayments are less. You're going to be able to build equity faster. You're going to have better history when it comes to borrowing money as well. So that way you'll be able to spend more in theory in the future by just making those sacrifices early on.
And the most important thing, I think, is research is king.
Yeah.
Like, know your market, know what the marketplace is doing. Don't listen to us. They're probably all great tips that go a long way to making sure that you get the right choice.
It's right there in the disclaimer at the end of the show that this should not be used as for any advice to make any decisions at all.
Indeed, I love listening to that bit at the end every week and just thinking, oh yeah, we're covered.
Yeah, that's covered. But you're right. So we actually had a client that was investing down here, and they'd purchased one of those, a house in one of those explosive mining towns that just went through the roof. So mining companies were paying them $800, $1,000 a week for what was effectively, a very small little humpy.
Yep.
And what happened though is that they bought right at the end of that cycle. So they must have paid, I think they said about $700,000, and they lost like $400,000-$500,000 in equity because it just fell out after the mine went.
The town just dried up and it was game over.
Because like as Prezi would say, that had no friends.
Prezi. He's got a nickname.
We're going to drop the friends as much as we can in here at the moment, because obviously there was no surrounding foundations of schools and shops and job opportunities. It was just boom market for one thing, and then after that one thing left,
game over.
Game over.
Yep, the local agent, he packed up his truck and he drove on out of town.
To the next mine.
Yeah. With the biggest truck in town too. He took it with him.
Reminds me of that Dr. Zeus book where...
Which one?
The Lorax?
Yeah, the Lorax.
Oh, yeah.
I know my Seuss.
Lorax? Is that the one where they've got the people buying the...
Thneeds?
Yeah. They've got the star on their bellies and they're taking them on and off, on and off.
No, I'm thinking a different one. I'm thinking of the Lorax is the one where he chops down the trees and they build a big factory. Which I thought worked well with your analogy, but
we'll take it.
I'm not sure about this star one. We'll have
I'm
to go
going to bring the book in tomorrow.
All right, looking forward to it.
You're going to be like, shit, he's right.
A story time with the property pod.
Follow on episode coming on Saturday.
We should start
Don't mind that. Yeah.
a book club.
All right, moving on. We do want to get to John's segue part. Does anyone have a good segue where we can talk about $1 million?
No. We should talk about $1 million property.
Yeah. Excellent.
Segue.
No, as you said before, kind of the idea of a property going for over $1 million in Hobart was absolute lunacy. It was kind of never even considered. And now there are 10 suburbs that are marking their median price at over $1 million.
Straight up, yeah.
So last week I tried to get you to guess stuff, but you'd already read the notes. Pat, don't look at your screen. I want to see if I can get you to guess any of the top 10 or all of the top 10.
All right, I'll start with Sandy Bay.
Tick.
Battery Point. Is it there?
No.
Newtown.
Yes.
Acton Park.
Correct.
Yes.
Where else are we going? North Hobart.
Correct.
Would West Hobart be on there?
Correct.
Yep.
Throw in another Hobart. Another.
Yeah. South Hobart.
Yeah, you got
I did still one above there for that one. That's we're getting through them.
You're down to your Eastern Shore suburbs now.
Okay, so we'd have to go for not Lindisfarne, not Howrah. Flip.
This is riveting.
Big oval there it is.
Bellarive.
There you go.
Bellarive hit $1 million.
Yeah.
Jesus.
Yeah.
Well, I haven't looked at the latest quarter stats.
Sorry for people that live in Bellarive. We do love you guys.
Yeah,
but you're not worth $1 million, according to John.
Anyway, what else are we getting through? What are we up to about?
Look, I'll just chuck in a few. There's Sanford, there's Taroona.
I was going to say Taroona. Yeah.
And I think that's probably the top 10. So they're all median value from May 2022 is over $1 million.
Amazing.
It's just crazy.
Well, see, why Bellarive struck me was that is still very much a, I suppose, affluent couple, growing family sort of area.
Yep.
And, Taroona obviously being the next to Sandy Bay, all those sort of that, and Hobart suburbs obviously, make sense. But I guess there's been some huge sales up in that suburb as well, which is going to, move that median above. Well, we just had it a moment ago with one of our staff members. They're buying $1 million property in Old Beach, and to think about that conversation only 2 years ago, they probably would have been saying, I'm negotiating around the 700 mark.
Well, I just sold a $1 million property in Rosetta. It's
There you go.
ridiculous that there's suburbs in the northern properties in the northern. Start again. Properties in the northern suburbs that actually achieve those sort of numbers. It's just mind-boggling.
Well, if we had this same podcast and we set ourselves up in Victoria and friends of our age, like to buy just our first home, we'd be saying, we're going to be spending about $1 million.
Yeah.
Like as if it was rolling off the tongue because that's what we had to do. So, but for Tassie, it's just such an extraordinary.
I had to write the contract the other day, John, and I had to get it in my head how to write $1 million. I was like, geez, this is that's enough zeros.
Yeah.
I'm not used to it, mate.
Yeah.
I'm only a little northern suburbs Asian. I don't sell $1 million places.
But it just goes to show, the reality of our expectations has started to change dramatically. And from what I can gather too is a lot of the market are probably a little bit more accepted of it and expect it. As opposed to those of us that are transacting in it daily. In many ways, if we consider and look in the future of what the demographic of Hobart's going to be, it seems to be a growing affluent society. People moving down from selling larger homes, the job prospects of higher paid remote options available, that, we are becoming a wealthier state. And, it's, I suppose a lot of us didn't really think about it. But now with tourism and job options and
lifestyle and natural beauty and no cable cart. They're all things people love.
Yeah. And also too, it's like lack of availability. It's really hard to get in. So, I guess it was always going to come. It was just a matter of time.
So, I guess at that top end of the market, it is quite tricky to, you've got to be saving your pennies that way. But we still are seeing affordable options at the other end. It's just maybe not right in the centre of Hobart. It's that sprawl you got to spread your net a bit wider is basically the idea for those people listening that are on that end of the spectrum. But at the other end of the spectrum, if you're at the top end of the market, you're probably not listening to this, but you're also probably
what is that?
you're probably needing to look north of $1 million. You got to know your audience, Pat. You got to know.
We have hated on ourselves a lot in this episode.
What a self-deprecating episode this one's been. But shout out to our friends out there.
Fun as always.
Always fun to be in the studio. Always fun to try and cut this together. So it might be a bit of a Frankenstein episode, but there's definitely something in there.
I wouldn't try too hard, mate. Let this one run.
Shout out to everybody out there that is sticking with the Property Pod. And look, the people that are stopping and saying g'day and letting us know that they do listen, we do really appreciate it.
Yeah, I was going to say, I really actually appreciate it. It's quite nice.
No, thank you for listening to the rot that we put out. We'll be back next week. We promise we will. We are a weekly show, and we'll see you all next week for more fun adventures on the Property Pod.
See you guys.
Well, look, wait for the John's sideshow, your story time with the Property Pod.
It makes me think of, you remember when Samuel Jackson read like the Go the F to Sleep book? That's what I'm picturing.
Good, yeah.
All right, guys. Bye.
Bye.
You have been listening to The Property Pod, recorded and edited by 414 Media House in conjunction with 414 Property Code.
This podcast is general information only, and the thoughts and views expressed is the opinion of our panel, and listeners should always seek then use their own investigation into any topic we discuss to ensure they fully understand their own situation.
It does not constitute and should not be relied on as purchasing, selling, financial or investment advice or recommendations, express or implied, and it should not be used as an invitation to take up any agent or investment services. No investment decision or activity should be undertaken on the basis of this information without first seeking qualified and professional advice.